The gospel reading for today is Mark chapter 12, verses 38 to 44. Jesus warns against the teachers of the law. As he taught them, he said, "Watch out for the teachers of the law who like to walk around in their long robes and be greeted with respect in the marketplace, who choose the reserved seats in the synagogues and the best places at feasts. They take advantage of widows and rob them of their homes, and then make a show of saying long prayers. Their punishment will be all the worse." As Jesus sat near the temple treasury, he watched the people as they dropped in their money. Many of the rich dropped in a lot of money. Then a poor widow came along and dropped in 2 little copper coins worth about a penny. He called his disciples together and said to them, "I tell you that this poor widow put more in the offering box than all the others. For the others put in what they had to spare of their riches, but she, poor as she is, put in all she had. She gave all she had to live on."
So if you, like me, are perpetually glued to Twitter, you'll have probably noticed a little over a month ago, there was a lot of chatter about a kidney story. And if you saw that like I did, and then also happened to be suffering a bout of insomnia later that night, you may have let your curiosity get the best of you, at which point you would have discovered that all of this hubbub revolves around an exceedingly lengthy New York Times story titled "The Bad Art Friend." The Bad Art Friend revolves around 2 women, both with ties to the Boston writers' scene. And I'll try to sum it up without leaving too many important things out, but again, it is very long. Basically, this first woman, Dawn, about 4 or 5 years ago now, donated her kidney. Not only did Dawn donate her kidney, but hers was a non-directed donation, which is to say that she wasn't donating to someone she knew or donating in a chain that would eventually get a kidney to someone she knew. She donated her kidney to a stranger, which is a pretty big thing to do. And then a year or 2 after this donation, Dawn learned that an acquaintance of hers by the name of Sonia had written a story, coincidentally, about a woman receiving a kidney donation. Now, a quick pause here so I can explain, as a fiction writer myself, that this is how it happens. Writers don't get to decide where their ideas come from. So it may be that you too one day are telling your writer friend about your colonoscopy, and something you say or something they think starts the wheel spinning, and at some point they'll start writing a story about a colonoscopy. Does that mean they are specifically writing about your colonoscopy? Not necessarily. If it sounds very similar, maybe. And a good writer knows how to change enough detail so it doesn't sound very similar. But otherwise, it's probably that they just got an idea from you talking about it and they made their own story. It happens all the time. Nonetheless, at this point, things in the story start to get a little tense. Dawn becomes worried that Sonia, whom she considered a friend, had taken her story directly from Dawn's life. Dawn doesn't react initially beyond a few emails, and then eventually Dawn actually gives the story a read and notices that in Sonia's story is a letter that sounds suspiciously like one that Dawn wrote to her anonymous kidney recipient, which was shared with friends, including Sonia. At this point, Dawn begins to call organizations employing or otherwise connected with Sonia and her story to air her suspicions of plagiarism and attempt to get the story out of print and out of the public eye. She also takes legal action against Sonia along the same plagiarism claim. Side effect of this is Sonia loses many good opportunities for a writer, and her job prospects are threatened as well as her financial well-being in general. And so Sonia responds eventually with legal action of her own, and to make matters worse, some of the evidence for the trial that came up was a private group chat between Sonia and her friends, all saying awful things about Dawn, who it turns out they don't like very much, which very much hurt her feelings and hurt everyone's feelings, and it's just a mess. Now, another important thing to know about this story is that every writer is taught, usually very early, that a good writer shows and doesn't tell. Which is to say, a good writer won't say, Jane was a lovely woman. She liked smiling at others and being kind to children and animals. A good writer will show you by writing about things that Jane says and does, exactly what who Jane is. I say this because if you read what this New York Times story tells you, you would probably come away seeing Dawn as a giving, selfless, resiliently optimistic person. And if you pay attention to what the story is showing you, there is a different picture available. Some details I've left out. Dawn created a group on social media to keep friends updated on everything happening with her kidney donation, which is a fairly normal thing to do. What isn't normal is that even before Sonia's story was a part of this at all, Dawn reached out to Sonia personally, and presumably others as well, to address the fact that Sonia hadn't reacted to anything in this group. And I'm sorry, can you imagine someone contacting you to ask why they didn't get a like out of you? Can you imagine not noticing one person's like in the many others you've gotten? Anyway, and that's the first of a number of signs that Dawn is also looking for a reaction here. Now, one quote from this piece that the good folks of the internet have thoroughly savaged stems from a writers' conference called AWP, at which Dawn also received little reaction from the community, prompting her to wonder, do writers not care about my kidney donation? Another thing the story shows but doesn't tell is that Dawn, at several points, peppers the narrative with quotes about what a good person she is. And it's no sin to think that you're a good person. Personally, I think I'm a pretty good person most of the time. The thing is, every time she mentions it, she conjures up a kind of comparison. She says, well, perhaps many more people would be motivated to donate an organ to a friend or family member in need. To me, the suffering of strangers is just as real. Which, of course, implies that for the rest of us, the suffering of strangers doesn't register at all and we don't notice. She talks also about how a traumatic past has afforded her a degree of moral clarity that others might not come by so easily. And after the aforementioned "do writers not care about my kidney" line, she notes that the situation kind of confused her because she thought she was in a community of service-oriented people. There's always some sense in her words of not just being good, but being better than everyone else, of being special because of her kindness and her charity, of being unique in how much she cares about others, which is, I may note, a little at odds with the fact that she spent years trying to put a woman out of work for personally wronging her. And that's the thing about the people Jesus speaks about in this text, who love to be greeted with respect and given the best seats and the places of honor. From their perspective, they're very giving and very kind, good people. The thing is, when they don't get the reaction they're looking for, when they put in the work and find that they aren't praised and respected, they get angry. They act out. They devour widows' houses and take revenge on those they feel have wronged them. And there's an age-old debate about whether or not the motives behind a good act are relevant to the goodness of the act itself. And perhaps a good litmus test is that of the so-called shopping cart test. The question of whether or not someone still does good things when no one will notice or care, or whether their goodness depends on the presence of praise. For Dawn, it becomes pretty evident at a certain point that despite the tremendous act of a live organ donation to a stranger, her actions are all seeking praise and respect. I can't comment knowledgeably on her motives in general, but I think it's fair to say that her speech and actions resemble the same scribes who love to be respected, but will devour the houses of those who don't give them praise. Many of you know that when I am not here, I work full-time with the homeless. And there's a conversation I had with a coworker not long ago that reminds me of some of this. We stopped at David Square, and my coworker was walking around trying to find people while I stayed with the van to give out food and other necessities. And two people approached whom I had never seen before, so I talked with them a bit, gave them some food and water, some socks. And one of them just went very overboard with their gratitude. "Oh, thank God for you. What an angel. You're a godsend. What would we do without you?" etc. And I hated it. And to be fair, I hate attention even in the best of circumstances, and it's a miracle I'm standing up here before you right now. But also, in my experience, when someone praises you that enthusiastically for a sandwich and socks, it means one of two things. Either this person has had such an awful day and experienced so much cruelty from others that even a small act of kindness stands in stark contrast, or they're saying all this because they think it's expected of them. Because they think it's what I want to hear, because their survival depends on praising the right people so that they will keep helping them. Because in the end, performance on one side begets performance on the other. So many people are performing charity and kindness to the poor so that the poor will perform a profound and enthusiastic gratitude back, not necessarily because it's sincere, but because they think that's how we want them to act. And they often perform for me too, I know, because that's what they're used to. They're expected to perform in many ways on many occasions. They've learned that they must present themselves a certain way before the rest of us in order to be even marginally accepted, just to occupy the role of a person sitting on the steps asking for a little help, which only further convinces many of them that they're unworthy of love, dignity, and even the most basic of necessities unless they hide things about themselves, and that bothers me. It bothers me first because no one should have to put on an act to be accepted or to have their basic needs met, not a single person. But it also just bothers me because I hate that these people feel the need to hide how they're feeling, what they're thinking, and who they really are. Because while they perform plenty for me too, I have also been blessed to see what some folks on the streets are like when they're not putting on a show. My life has been enriched by so many people who number among the poorest of the poor. I have learned strength and resilience from them. I've seen good-heartedness and charity and community. I've been a grateful witness to the good souls of many people on the streets. And beyond that, I've laughed at their jokes and listened to their crazy stories. I've sat with them on the sidewalk while I try to scrape together a little money. I've been with them when the rich walk by, showing them a wad of cash they don't intend to share. I've listened to them when they've reached a breaking point. I've visited them in the sharp winds and snow. I have been tremendously blessed to know so many people among the poorest of us, and my life has been and continues to be enriched by their presence. And I want to make it clear that this isn't me saying that the poor need us to pay them more attention. They don't need you or me to see the real them. They don't need pity or sympathy or our attention at all. They don't depend on our approval. They do need their basic needs met, and we as a society often feel the need to make them prove that they're worthy of it unless they perform for us. And I do feel sad that so many people miss out on the beauty I've seen in this community because the community is made to play a role to gain approval. But the people who love to be praised don't care much about how they're missing out or seeing the goodness in people. The goodness in people isn't what they want. They want other people calling them good. And so long as the poor are willing to thank them effusively for every pair of socks and cold sandwich, they'll never get to see who these people really are and never realize they're missing out on anything. Coincidentally, that's part of what Sonia's story is actually about. The kidney donation is background, context. So in your story, it revolves around two women. Xuntao, a Chinese-American woman who is most likely an alcoholic, who's near fatally wounded while driving under the influence. And Rose, the nice white lady whose kidney donation Xuntao receives. And it's about the discomfort between these two upon their meeting. The story is about Rose desperately wanting some response of profound gratitude from Xuntao, and Xuntao being unable to give her that. Rose probably doesn't even fully realize what she wants. But it's apparent in the story that she seems to have wanted more from the interaction than Xuntao can give her. And Xuntao already has several people in her life asking her to be someone else. Her family checking that she hasn't started drinking again. Her husband trying to get her into yoga. Everyone is expecting something from her. And knowing this context, it can be easy to see just how she can't bring herself to weep at Rose's feet and wash them with her hair. Of course, she's too exhausted from keeping up appearances for everyone to listen to Rose pretend her grandmother's chair is some ancient cultural artifact. Of course, she doesn't want to perform gratitude for a stranger when she's been performing several roles for several people already, not to mention recovering from losing both her kidneys. But Rose won't see that context. Rose doesn't want to see that context. Rose wants to be thanked and praised, and she sees a woman refusing to give that to her. It doesn't matter how much stress and trauma that woman has endured, how exhausted she is, that she has a million good reasons not to want to play the role of the grateful peasant in Rose's passion play. But when you don't want to see who someone really is, you won't. And in real life, too, Dawn is so hell-bent on telling the story of her own charity to the world that she can't see the woman she's tormenting. She sees only that she's not getting the praise that she wants, and that's a problem for her. And that's also what this biblical passage is about, really. Because Jesus' message was never one of charity. Even when Jesus told people to give to the poor, he expressed it as, "Sell all your possessions and give the money to the poor," which of course would mean that you are also one of the poor now. Jesus' message was one of solidarity with the poor, of building community with the poor, of getting to know them and learn from them and love them. That's also why I think he ends his doom speaking to the devourers of widows' housing to point the apostles to the widow with 2 coins. Now, in each gospel, Jesus is just a little bit different. And one of the most notable features of Mark's Jesus is that he loved to tell the apostles riddles, and he never gave them any hints, no matter how hard they were struggling. More often, he would just mock them for not getting it. So I think that when Jesus points the apostles to the woman with the coins, there's a double purpose. Yes, he is honoring her sacrifice, which is a great sacrifice. She is very likely one of the widows having her house devoured, and here she is still giving to the community. While it is absolutely shameful that the establishment of the day would take so much from her and still demand more, it is also a sign of great charity on her part. And also, I believe that when Jesus pointed the apostles to the widow, he was also pointing them to the widow, telling them to pay attention to her, teaching them to notice the great acts of the people who never get the seat of honor and are never praised, but who demonstrate greater faith and greater love than every single one of us. He wants them to see her in her fullness, not as a prop to give money to or get money out of to make yourself feel good, but as a human being with a whole life of her own to worry about. Because nothing changes from just giving out money, no matter how much it is. It perpetuates the system. We are still up here and they are still down there, and we can give them enough to get by and keep the ball rolling. And the biggest contributor to homelessness is this wall that separates us from them. But Jesus was never about keeping the ball rolling or perpetuating the cycles of empire. Jesus was about breaking down the walls that keep us sheltered from seeing those below us and keeps them locked out of public life. And in order to start breaking down that system, you have to start by getting to know people, really. Looking past the role they're playing to meet their needs, and forsaking the role you're playing to meet your needs. Breaking down the performances we put on for each other and embracing real, honest knowing of each other in equality and community. All the money in the world can't buy that profound moment of encounter between people, but that is what actually changes things, changes people, and in the end, changes us. Thank you.